exploring the enhanced iPlatform. So we're going to be walking through iPlatform. This is going to be a general overview. So for some of you who have been in iPlatform before, hopefully this will be a good refresher. And for those who haven't seen it, hopefully this will be a good introduction to see all the good things in iPlatform. We'll be doing some more trainings throughout this coming spring. And so there'll be some new stuff we'll be showing you and some other types of trainings we'll be doing as well. But today will be kind of an overview of the platform, and we'll talk a little bit more about kind of well, actually, I'll mention right now, another purpose of this training, as we hope, will be for you to have tools that you can hopefully train your friends, your colleagues, wherever you are as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you, I'm actually going to come out of presentation mode for a minute, and I'm going to point out that in this presentation, which you will have access to, we've put a whole bunch of notes. So depending on the slides, talk through what we're trying to communicate on each slide, and information about kind of where to go or things to look for. So hopefully by using these notes, you'll be able to take this presentation and share it with your colleagues as well. So we encourage you to be champions for iPlatform once you've started exploring it, and please use this as a resource to help train other folks within your schools, or if you're a parent, other parents maybe in a PTA or any other kind of organization. So I'm Mike Schwartz. I've been working with the Department of Education for almost 20 years, for quite some time, and it's been wonderful to see the department advance from where it was many years ago, where it didn't even have a student data collection, didn't have any of this data, to a point now where the department's done a great job, and we'll talk more about it, but being able to take data and sharing it with the public, sharing it with schools, for folks to get more information about how schools are performing. I am on the call today, as you can see in you might see in the from the panelists, if you can see those, with Karen Matzo, who's also been working with the department for quite some time. Karen does a lot of training for schools all around the state for the department. Kier Young, who is leading up the department for accountability. So she is really the point person in charge, and she'll tell you a little bit more about herself and her role in a minute. But for accountability and helping understand how schools are doing and classifying schools, and we'll talk more about that. And then Kristen, who is with the department as well, and she is leading up the work for the assessment system. So making sure that all schools are able to manage and conduct the main assessments for the state. In addition to the four of us who are here today to answer questions and give you a walkthrough, just to make sure you all understand, there are people, as we expect, on this webinar who are working in schools, teachers, principals, superintendents. There may also be folks who are parents on this call, who are just interested in looking at data, legislatures, et cetera. So this webinar today is kind of a broad scope in terms of stakeholders, and hopefully this will really be helpful for all of you, regardless of your role, what hat you're wearing, to understand how you can look at data and understand better how schools are doing. One of the main focuses for the department is the concept of making data and making school performance transparent. The current commissioner really has made it one of his main themes to help take all the data that the department has and get it into the hands of teachers, of parents, et cetera. So you'll see through this tool, hopefully, is one way that is happening. The thought is the more folks that can look at data and look at how schools are performing, then all of us, regardless of our hat, can help improve education for students. And that's kind of the part of the goal of this. This system is should be obvious, showing you aggregate data. So total numbers of students. It's not showing you any information about a given student. This is all that obviously is very private information. This information, because it's a public website, is aggregated, summarized data about how schools are doing. So you'll see that throughout the system. Because of that, there are many times that you might see that data is what's called suppressed, or it's hidden. And so if there are too few number of students, in general, we use the number of 11 within the state. So if there's less than 11 students, you may find that data is suppressed, so that you're not finding out information about students that you might be able to really identify how a given student is doing because of the small sample size. Or the small size. Because this is public data, or the way the system is developed, there's no login required. So you go into the system that we're going to walk through, you don't have to log into anything, and you can't break anything. So we really encourage you to go into it and play around with it and see what you can find. There is a plethora of data, as I mentioned earlier, within the department. And this data, there are many systems where this data is collected. And so we collect data through different avenues. Working with schools, we collect data. One source is called the I4C system. It's a student level data collection system that all schools submit data about how students are doing at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, at the end of the year. We also collect data through our assessment system. We collect data through our special education system. There are a variety of systems that the department uses to collect data. You can learn more about those systems. This is actually a live link, and I should also make sure you know how to get to this presentation. But this is a live link, and you can learn more about what data is collected by clicking on that link, and it'll bring you to that. We also, as I mentioned, have several assessment systems. And so I'm going to just talk very briefly, but then open up to Kristen and Kieran to talk a little bit more about these next two pieces. But we take all the student data that we collect. We take assessment data about assessments that students are taking throughout the year. And we use that for a couple of reasons. One, we use that to determine kind of how schools are performing. And so there's this whole accountability system. It's a system that defines how we determine whether schools are struggling or whether schools are succeeding in terms of how students are progressing. So we use that data. We take the student data, the assessment data, and these indicators that determine how schools are doing. And that's the data that we're presenting through iPlatform. So let me pause for a minute and let Kieran and Kristen introduce themselves a little bit more and tell you if they want to briefly about the assessment system and accountability system. So Kristen, do you want to start?
Sure. And it says I cannot turn my video on, so I apologize for that, but I wanted to say hello. I'm Kristen Crawford. As Mike said, I'm the assessment administrator here at NH I'm relatively new to the role. I've been here since September, and I've corresponded with only a couple of you. I do look forward to meeting a lot more folks in the field over the coming year. I sent out a survey asking for some feedback in December, and I greatly appreciate the number of responses that I got, especially your candid responses to some of your thoughts on the assessments that we provide. And as Mike mentioned, there's a variety of assessments that are offered in New Hampshire, and I know all of those of you that are in schools are already aware of this, but for any other stakeholders who have joined who are maybe not quite as familiar with the New Hampshire assessments, we use 4 different tests to assess our students statewide. For our general education population, the New Hampshire SAS, we give that to students in grades 3 through 8 in math and ELA, and grade 11, 5, 8, and 11 in science. For high school math and high school ELA, though, we use the SAT test. For students that have significant cognitive differences, they take what the DLM test. That's a test that's we're part of a consortia, and it's put out through Kansas University. So it's designed for some of our more special education students. And then we also offer the WIDA access test for students who are English learners. So those are the four main assessments that we conduct at the state level. And as most of you that are in the schools know, there are also a lot of school level, district, interim, and other assessments that you give throughout the year. But the information that goes into iPlatform would be the state level data. And I will turn it over to Kieran.
Thank you, Kristen. It's nice to meet you all. My name is Kieran Huang. I'm the Accountability Administrator at NH The Office of State and Federal Accountability at NH oversees school identification and the report card requirement that are under ESSA. And since the ESSA designations for fall 2022 cycle were released in November of last year, we've been providing different opportunities to help identify districts and schools understand the data that led to their designation. And iReport is a great tool to better understand your school's assessment and accountability data. So we're excited to be providing this training. In addition to this particular training, I also wanted to just point out a few resources on the NH ESSA page that I think can complement this training today. So Karen will be sharing the specific links, but when you go to the NH ESSA page, which is the best place to get any updates regarding federal accountability, you'll see a few resources. So one is a fact sheet. Oh, thank you. So if you scroll down, there is a fact sheet called Overview of the Federal Accountability System in New Hampshire. That is a short description of how the overall federal accountability system works in New Hampshire as required by ESSA. So if you are trying to get a holistic picture of how the system works, that might be a good thing to take a look at. And then right below that, there's the Recorded Accountability 101 training, which is a training that we've been offering to all districts and schools to better understand the federal accountability system, and the accompanying slides are listed there as well. So again, we recommend that you view these resources to better understand the data that you're seeing in iReport. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyung and Kristen. And I just have to say, I've mentioned I've been at the department for 20 years or so. So it is so wonderful to have them both here, and they're doing some great stuff so quickly as they've joined the department. So definitely visit that site, look at those videos that Kyung mentioned. If you click on the link here too for the assessment, this is the assessment page that has the information that Kristen was talking about. So definitely click on those links. I put in the chat, or somebody's going to put in the chat, I believe, the link to this presentation. So if you have any troubles finding it, put a message in the chat. And I should mention that too, if you've got questions, please put them in the chat in Zoom, and Karen and Chris and Kieran will be watching over that and let us know. Okay. So let's talk about iPlatform, because that's really what we're here to talk about today. So iPlatform, as I mentioned, contains all this information that the department's been collecting, and it digests it and puts it into a format that hopefully is accessible and usable by all of you. There are really two main components right now to iPlatform. There's something called iReport, and iReport allows you to basically have kind of a report card of how schools or districts are doing. So think of it just like a report card for a student. This is a report card for a school or a district, and it has a variety of different characteristics. Just like a student's report card might have information about math and English and science and gym and or phys ed and social, emotional, etc. This report card is similar. It has information about academics. It has information about the environment of the school. It has information about the educators in that school, etc. But iReport is really about a school or a district. You can do some comparison, but for the most part, it's looking at one school or one district. iExplore, on the other hand, lets you take some indicator that we collect in the system. For example, cost per pupil. How much do schools spend per pupil? And it allows you to look at that across the entire state. So you can look at all the schools throughout the state, you can sort it, you can zoom in on certain parts of the state, et cetera, and get information about how students are doing, or how much your schools are funding, or what the cost is for students at schools across the state. There's many different indicators, and you can look at those indicators across the entire state. It also lets you correlate or look at two indicators and see if there's a correlation between those indicators. So and we might look at one of these later. How does cost per pupil compare to or correlate to teacher experience? Is there a higher cost when you've got more experienced teachers? We can look at things to that effect. So that's what iExplore kind of allows you to do. There's also a couple of other components. There's something called iDefine, that we'll talk briefly about, but it lets you basically get more information about what are the data collections that the department receives, and what does that data look like, and what does the data mean, or what do the fields mean? What's the description of these different fields? And there's also going to be something coming shortly, which I'll talk about towards the end of the presentation, but I believe it's going to be called iAchieve. We haven't finalized the name. The department hasn't finalized the name yet. So if you have any suggestions, once you hear more about it, let us know. But that also is going to be a great tool to let you understand more deeply about how students are doing on the assessment test, looking longitudinally, looking at how students are growing from grade to grade. So a lot of good stuff. Let me see if there's anything else I want to just mention at this point. And by all means, other panelists, please chime in if there's something you think I missed. So as we discussed earlier, there's a variety of tools that we can use that we use to get the data into iPlatform. Once we're in iPlatform, there's some common themes about how you maneuver and how you get around iPlatform, both iReport and iExplore. So let me talk about how you get into it and talk to you a little bit about how you maneuver when you're in iPlatform, iReport, or iExplore. The easiest way to get to iPlatform, and I'm just going to actually go do it just so you can see it, is you go to Google or whatever your favorite browser, your favorite search engine is. You just type in iPlatform, NH, and that typically will bring it up right towards the top. You'll see both a link to the iPlatform, and you also see a link to training resources. For example, this video, once we've recorded it and we've cleaned it up, we will post that video on this training page. So this is the best way to get into iPlatform. It's an easy way to do it. There's also the direct link here on the slide as well. Let me first talk a little bit about iReport and how you maneuver iReport. And what I'm going to do is just bring you through a couple of slides, and then we're going to do a live demo. So when you first come to that landing page, you'll have and you choose iReport, you first have to say, as I mentioned earlier, iReport is like a report card about a school or district. So the first thing you have to choose is the school or the district that you want to look at. And you can do that by searching by town. You can do that just by entering the name of the school. The easiest way to do it, and we'll do it later, is you just type in, you click on the name of the school, make a school selection. You just type in like PORT for Portsmouth, and pop up will be just those Portsmouth schools, and you can select one. Once you've gotten into iReport, and again, we'll go through live in a few minutes, but I just want to point some things out here. You'll see a series of tabs across the top, and that's the way you maneuver, you navigate through iReport. So you click on a given tab, and you'll get the information about that tab. So you click on achievement, obviously you get achievement information. You click on educator, you get information about the educators in that school or that district. There are a lot of common themes that you'll see through iReport as you're exploring through it. For example, you'll see colors. So blue, light blue, orange, and gray typically represent whether this indicator is in the lowest 25% for the state, the middle 50% would be blue, or the top 25% would be red. I believe that's the color combination. I'll double check it in a minute. But basically, it's not saying that that is good or bad. But it's just telling you that this school for this indicator is in the top 25%, the lowest 25%, or the middle 50% of all schools in the state. So just as an example, like you may see cost per pupil, and cost per pupil may be, maybe it's showing it's the lowest 25%. So for some folks, that'll be a good thing, maybe. For other folks, they'll say that's a bad thing. So it's not to say whether it's good or bad, it's just trying to put things into context for you. Just want to make sure I got this colors right. We'll double check later. The other thing to point out is when there's a lot of hovering over, hovering pop-ups that come up. So as you hover over certain things, you'll see more information pop up. So I encourage you, and we'll see that as I go through the system. You'll also see there's some symbols that show up. So in this case, this Memorial Bedford school was a blue ribbon school. So there's a blue ribbon symbol in that page. So there's a lot of things that you'll see, kind of common themes that might come up as you're looking through iReport. And I'll mention more about the navigation as we're actually going on live demo. So let me go ahead and do that. So we're going to switch back over. So I'm going to get out of the slideshow presentation, and we're going to go over to iPlatform. And so I Googled iPlatform NH, and we come down here and we see that the iReport link is right here halfway down on the page. And so if I click that, it's going to open up iReport. And so again, the first thing we're going to have to do is say what district or school do we want to look at. So I'm going to go to select a school and just type in PORTS. That's going to limit it to any school that begins with the word PORTS. And we've got Portsmouth Middle School. And so I'm going to make that my example right now. And then I click View Report. And so this is going to bring up the report card for Portsmouth Middle School. It defaults you typically are always to the profile tab. So this is a general profile about the school. So here we see what the school grade range is, who the principal is. You see information about enrollment. We see information about the student population. As I mentioned earlier, if you hover over things may pop up. So if little surprises that you can find, it's kind of like that surprise in the cereal box. So here, if you hover over total student enrollment, it's actually giving the enrollment trend over 3 years. So we can see the enrollment was 512, it went up to 525, and now it's down to 491 in 2022. You can hover over you can see the gender breakup. If you hover over the student population breakout, it'll actually tell you what that population breakout was over the course of the past few years. So in this case, we're looking at what percentage of the students in Portsmouth Middle School are receiving free and reduced lunch, are considered economically disadvantaged. And so it's 14.9% this year, but we look over time, we can see it was 20%, it went down to 16%, et cetera. And then students with disabilities, another example is you can see what percentage of the population is on an IEP, individual education plan. So those are the students who are identified as special students with disabilities. So that's the profile information. And again, I'm not going to go through every piece of data on every one of these pages, but the main goal is to help you kind of understand how to get to these things and take a look at them yourself. Let's go ahead and jump to achievement. And so what I want to show you is that for most of these next tabs, achievement, growth, environment, educator, all of these tabs, they'll have a similar format. In all these pages, you're going to see, for whatever you're looking at, here we're looking at achievement, you're going to see information about those indicators. So indicators that were data that's been defined to help you understand how schools are doing in terms of academic achievement are listed here. And so in particular, as Kristen mentioned earlier, she kind of oversees and she explained the state assessment tests. It's either the NHSAS in grades 3 through 8 or the SAT in grade 11. Those results will be here. So we're looking at a middle school, so that's going to be the NHSAS. And you can see how what percentage of students are considered proficient in English language, and what percent of students are considered proficient in math. And so you can actually hover over and you'll see that in this school, 74% of the students were identified as proficient in English language arts, and 59% were identified as proficient in math. You will also see a common theme throughout the system. You'll frequently see these arrows. If you click on the arrow, you're going to get what's called a flyout. And actually, if you hover it tells you that. It tells you what you're going to see. And if I click on it, you'll see that come up. And now it's actually going to give you some more detail about that indicator. And so here it actually breaks it down by group. So it says, okay, for economically disadvantaged, the students who are receiving free and reduced lunch, how are they doing in proficiency? And so here we can see that they're not doing quite as well as the overall population, which was at 74. Here we've got 54% of the students are proficient in that group. So it's a way to understand how students are doing in certain groups or in certain grades in this case. I'm going to point out this line, but before I do that, I do want to kind of step back and say again, on all of these pages, you're going to see general information about the indicators for that area, like achievement or growth. You're going to typically see information about putting that information in context, and in context usually to the district and to the state. So although Portsmouth might be at, we said 74%, we can see that across the yellow is yellow is Portsmouth, blue, this light blue here is the district, and then this green is the state. So you can see how is the school doing compared to the district, compared to the state. Same thing, for math. So you'll typically see information about the indicator, information over time, in context, and then information over time. So how has this indicator look? How has the indicator changed from one year to the next? You'll see in this case in 2020, we see the word COVID. So as you all have not forgotten, COVID was very prominent in 2020, and as a result, students didn't take the state test, and so that's why the state is not showing here. You'll also see information, you may see some other information further down the screen. In this case, for achievement, we're seeing information about participation, what percentage of students participated in the test. You see information about some of English language proficiency. So how are students doing in English who are English as their second language? In this case, you see star N because there's too small a population in Portsmouth for us to display that. So a lot of information about achievement. I did want to point out this line. The state does have targets that this is a requirement, and actually where Kyung showed us where you can go to the accountability page, that page describes in more detail what those targets are and how they were determined. But they're targets that we hope all schools will be able to achieve each year, and that target moves up each year. In this case, Portsmouth actually did better than the target, but that's what the number is you're seeing here. So 62.5% is the target. In fact, Portsmouth was 74%. Karen, Kieran, Kristen, anything I missed so far? Or should I continue on? All right.
So far, so good.
And let me know if there's any, I'll pause too occasionally. Let me know if there's any questions we should answer to everybody. I do see there's some chats going back and forth, but let me know. Okay. Growth. So let's talk briefly about growth. Growth, and I want to mention it. There are two primary high-level things to mention about growth. One is growth is a little bit complicated to understand, and so it's something that look at now and think about, rethink about. And as you can see, after you spend a little bit of time thinking about it, please reach out, and the department can certainly help provide some more information for you. Having said that, I should also say that you will see information at the top of every screen that provides good descriptions. You can click on things too, and that'll pop up even more information. So here it actually pops up more information about what growth looks like. The other thing to mention about growth is it's a great indicator to help you understand how is your school doing academically compared to similar schools around the state. And so it doesn't matter whether you have a school that has students who are really doing well in achievement, they've got high percentage of students proficient, or if you've got a school that's struggling. Growth lets you look at how are your students doing compared to similar students throughout the state. So basically it says, if Mike Schwartz scored a certain level 2 years ago and last year, how did I do this year compared to similar people who scored like I did last year and the year before? So it lets you look at how the school is helping its students compared to similar students around the state. So it's kind of a good equalizer. So even if you're in a school with very high proficiency, you can still look at growth to understand how you're doing compared to other schools with high proficiency. In this case, again, we see Portsmouth in this example is doing anything 50% is about average. So anything above 50 means you're doing a little bit better than similar schools around the state. So anything above 50 is typically considered pretty good. So here they did well in English, not doing quite as well, but also doing well in math. And Karen, even though you're muted, I'll say bless you because I see you sneezed. Okay. Again, as we saw before, you see some general information about the growth. It's also broken down by subgroups. Let me take a look at environment, and this is going to be a good place. Oh, the other thing I should point out, English was red in color, math was blue. You'll see that consistency throughout the system as well. Typically, you'll see red is referring to English, blue is to math, and I think green is to science. Okay, so school environment. So again, what are the indicators about environment that are tracked or used through iPlatform? We look in the top left corner and we see them. So here it's suspension, expulsion, and then I think we also, we also have maybe average class size, but maybe we don't. I'm not sure why we're not having that right now, but typically you'd have average class size as well. So one thing to notice here is that in 2021, we saw a drop in suspensions in school suspensions, and then we saw it pop back up in 2022. And again, that's something that we might all expect because of the COVID situation. But one thing we might want to ask is, how does that compare to the state? And so you can look at it below here, and you can see too below in the state, we dropped quite a bit in 2021. But then we can actually look, and again in 2022 across the state, we went up again to 3.23%. So this is one thing that all of you as educators, for those of you who are educators in schools, may want to be thinking about is, how is my suspension, especially my in-school suspension, changing since we're back into schools? And watch this over time. This went from 2.5% across the state up to 3.23%. So that's a pretty significant increase. And certainly something we want to be making sure that isn't getting out of control, in the years to follow. I also want to make this point, take this opportunity to talk about how you can get more information about the state data. So although we see district, school, and state when we're looking at this in context, as I described it before, another way you can get information about the state is if you go to the bottom of the screen, it says New Hampshire State Report. And if you click on that link, it's going to open up a new tab. It's going to bring us back into iReport. But now it's going to bring us into the state. And so here we're looking at the results for the entire state. So 168,000 students that were enrolled in the state. You can look at achievement, et cetera. So here, if we go and look at environment, hopefully we'll see what I just showed you, which is that 3.23% that is showing. And this is where we can see more clearly that COVID resulted in a sharp decrease in the terms of the number of suspensions, obviously because most kids were at home. But then we see a spike again this year going above where we were before. So,
Mike, there's a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Does the state break down that data? Does it disaggregate that data by demographics?
Yeah, so I would thank you for asking that question. So I'm pretty sure if we click on this flyout, we should see that, and we do. So it's broken out by the number of days suspended, but then also by race, homeless, military, disability, and students in foster, and English language learners. Yeah, so this is where you can see that breakout. Great question.
Thanks.
One thing I didn't point out before, every time you expand something in iPlatform or iReport, iPlatform, actually iExplore as well, if you want it to go away, you have to click again on the same thing you click to expand it. So this expanded, if I click again, it shrinks it. So expand, shrink, expand, shrink. So, same thing, you'll see that throughout the system. There are places where if I want to, there'll be other cases where you'll see if you click on something and the list expands, you've got to click on it again to make it shrink.
Mike, there's also another question about what counts as incidents of violence. Is that something that you can answer?
No, I'll tell you what I know. What I know is that there is so this suspensions information we get through the student level. I call the I4C student level collection, where we get record for every student, and it tells us whether they've been suspended in school, out of school, how many days, etc. The incidents of violence come from a survey, so we don't know specifically which students, and that's it's a good thing. The state doesn't need to know, but that survey includes information about all the instances of violence. I think those typically include things like physical, somebody hitting somebody, includes things like maybe bringing a knife to school or something to that effect. So I can't tell you more detail than that. Maybe, Kieran, Kristen, Karen, one of you might Google on the department's website and look for the school safety survey, because that's what it comes from. Okay. So a couple other last things to show here. Educator. So there's some great information about the educators in schools. So for those of you who aren't aware, not every teacher has to be certified for every class they teach in New Hampshire. There are cases where a teacher might be certified in math, for example, but they're also teaching one class of biology. So they're teaching 4 classes or 3 classes of math and 1 class of biology. And that's totally okay in the state. That's part of the rules that the state has. But that's considered teaching out of your area. And so this helps you understand how frequently might that be happening within a school. And so here you can see what percentage of classes are taught by teachers certified in the area. It tells you information about teachers who are their level of experience. Teachers are considered experienced in New Hampshire when they've been teaching for at least 3 years in New Hampshire and are deemed effective as teachers for those 3 years, and then they're moved into the experience category. So you can get an idea of what percentages of teachers are experienced, and there's some more information, including the average teacher salary. So this information all exists on the educator page, like we saw before. You can see that information over time. You can see the detailed indicators. The last thing I want to point out is, and I'm going to jump to finance. 2 things. One is more than 2 things, at least. You'll see star CS. CS, if you actually hovered over it, it should tell you that it stands for coming soon. I think it should tell you. No, it's not hovering, but CS stands for coming soon. So we don't yet have the finance data in, and I believe the graduation data in for 2022, but that'll be coming in the next month. If I go back to 2021, however, you will see some of that information. The thing I wanted to point out here is I'm looking at the state of New Hampshire, and actually let me go back to the one we're looking at, the school. What I wanted to point out is that some information in the system, is not meaningful or available. So for depending on how you're looking at what you're looking at in iReport. So for this example, finance is typically reported at the district level, not the school level. So although we see we don't see, let me switch to 2021. We've got to do that as well. So you won't see a breakdown of the expenditures at the school level. However, if I go here and I switch from the school to the district, and I choose the district, and I've got to click the close button again to shrink that, you'll see the detail. So understand that there are some indicators that it's better to look, you'll see more detail at the district than you might see at the school. The other thing, of course, is like college. If we had been looking at Portsmouth Middle School, you're not going to get information about college in Portsmouth Middle School. You've got to go to Portsmouth High School to see the information. So I just point out that some of those things are only available, for certain schools or for district versus school. Okay. I am going to switch over to iExplore because time is running out. Or I'm getting a little worried about time, and I want to show you some more things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to iPlatform NH. Brings me right back to the main landing page of the department's website, and I'm going to go into iExplore. And before I do that, actually, I'm also going to go to our presentation because I want to point out a couple of things in the presentation. One is that the things I just showed you, many of the things I showed you, some of these I might have meant to show you, but I didn't, are here in this demo list. So again, you've got access to this presentation. Please, feel free to go through here if you want to kind of rethink some of the things I showed you and take a look at this, and it should tell you some of those things I showed you. And again, remember, there's lots of notes on these slides as well that will help you look at some of the things I showed you. Let me talk a little bit. No, please go ahead.
Do you mind if I just go over some of these questions? Because I've been answering some of them in the chat, but it might be better for me to just restate so that everybody can hear it, and also so that we can answer some of these questions. So there was a question about what to do if you see any discrepancies on the iReport data. So the deadline for districts to report any discrepancies on iReport was in December. So if you see any discrepancies that you had already reported to accountability at doe.nh.gov and you are seeing that it is not yet addressed, or if you missed that deadline, please reach out to accountability at doe.nh.gov and we can look into potentially resolving the issue. There was also a question about certain schools not being able to see growth. The growth section on iReport. So that's because if you're looking at a high school, high schools do not use the growth indicator. So that's why you're not going to see that page available. Similarly, if you're looking at a report for elementary or middle school and you click on, I believe it's the college and career college tab, you're not going to be able to see that data because that's not a metric for elementary and middle school. In terms of the question regarding what counts as an incident of violence, I think it will be best for a specialist in this particular data collection to answer this question further. If you feel like you need more information, so please email us at accountability@doe.nh.gov and we can get back to you. iPlatform currently only houses data for public schools, does not house any other data for private schools. There was also another question. Is there an option to print any reports that we find to be useful to us? Absolutely. And I think, Mike, would you be able to just walk them through how to print the report?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different options. One is you can go to download, and this will let you download data, and you can download it to a PDF or a CSV. So that would probably be the best way to do it. I think there's some other features in iExplore maybe that allow you to do some additional printing as well that we can take a look at when we get there. Yeah.
And there was one more question about the difference between cost per school and cost per district, especially if it is one school district. I would think that if there's only one school district, the difference may be minimal, but there could be other costs that are factored in at the district level that may not be factored at the school level, but I'm not the expert in school finance, so we can certainly have the specialist in this particular topic get back to you. So we can if you wouldn't mind just emailing me at accountability@doe.nh.gov, we can certainly have that question to be addressed in a more precise and accurate manner.
Great. Is that it so far, or for right now?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you, Karen, and definitely I appreciate the pause, so feel free to do it again in a little while if it's helpful. Okay, so we just went through iReport. Again, remember iReport, you're thinking about a given school, a given district. What's the report card look like for that school or district? You can go back to different years we saw. You can look at the data longitudinally, et cetera. iExplore, as we explained before, lets you explore, as the word says, a given indicator across the entire state, across all the schools in the state, all the districts in the state. There are a couple of ways to get into iExplore. So one way actually is when you are in iReport, if you're on certain indicators, and that indicator is something that we have in actually, let me go to, I need to go to a specific school, I believe. So if you're in iReport, sorry, let me get back to here. Within iReport, there will be times when you see the word iExplore. I think there might be an arrow next to it, and that lets you jump into iExplore and see that information within iExplore. So I think if I go to achievement, yeah, right here. So here where we're looking at achievement data, if you wanted to know more information about this achievement indicator across the entire state, you click on this link, and this throws you into iExplore. So we should actually, then you got to choose the one. So we want to learn more about, ELA proficiency across the state. It brings you here into iExplore and defaults to what you're looking at, ELA proficiency. So another example might have been, I think if I go to Educator, we were talking about cost per pupil before. If I click, nope, that's not going to be here. Well, I guess here, if I click on iExplore down here, it will again let me average teacher salary. So here you can click on that, brings me to iExplore, and same kind of concept. It's now showing me average teacher salary across all the schools in the state. So that's one way to get into iExplore. The other way to get into iExplore is you just click, you go to iPlatform NH, and not too surprisingly, you scroll down, you click on iExplore, and that's going to bring you to iExplore. So a couple of different ways to get into iExplore. Let me go back here. So let me talk about iExplore a bit. So just like we saw in iReport, there are tabs across the top. That's the main way you get from one function to the next within iExplore. Rather than being about different indicators, these are different ways to look at indicators, and I'll talk about most of them. And again, play around, click on it, and see what you find. The Explore tab lets you do just what it says. As I mentioned, explore an indicator. So you can choose any indicator across the state, average class size, whatever indicator you want, and it'll show you that information across the state. You'll see, if I gotta move my little zoom thing over here, but there, if you go to the bottom of the page, you'll see right in the middle of the x-axis a little line. If you click on that, it'll actually sort the data for you. So now you can quickly see the average class size sorted by school throughout the state. We must have some mistake there with our data, so we'll have to look into that. On this Explore page, it also shows you that information, whatever you're looking at, that indicator class size, and it always will show it to you compared to proficiency in math and ELA. So now what we're doing is they're actually looking for what's called a correlation. So it's going to show you if there's a correlation between class size, and that's what it's doing on the y-axis, and proficiency in math and ELA on the x-axis. And so each one of these little indicators represents one of these schools. So if you want to look at average class size and math, we actually see here that there is no, there's what's called this R value. And so if you want to look at this data, I encourage you to Google R value and understand what that means. It's called the Pearson R value. But if the R value is not less than 0.7, negative 0.7, or greater than 0.7, so it's got to be like 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, then it's really telling you that there's no correlation found in the data you're looking at. So in this specific data, it's really saying there is no correlation that's been found between class size and proficiency in math and ELA, given the indicator and the class size information that we have. But you can see, here's a school, for example, that has a high proficiency and low class size. And so if you hover over that, each one of these is a school, and that's Francistown Elementary School. So you can look and see, where schools fall. You will also see in here that you can limit what you're looking at. So maybe you only want to look at a region, and I only want to look at the Lakes region. And so I can say only Lakes region, I'll click apply. And now we're just looking at the schools in the Lakes region. So, maybe you're a parent who's moving to a certain part of the state and wants to understand how schools, compare to each other. Or maybe you are somebody in the Lakes region in the school and you want to understand what the other schools around you look like for any of these different indicators. So you can choose any indicator and you can explore that indicator. Compare, I'm just going to fly through some of these again in interest of time, but compare basically lets you compare two schools or a school in a district and look at all their indicators of one school versus the other school. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. Discover lets you look to see if there's a correlation between two different indicators. This is outside of academics. So is there a relationship between cost per pupil and experience of teachers? And you can see if there's a correlation. And you can do that for a given region, for a given year of data, for schools. So you can look at it in different ways. We'll actually go through another example of that in a minute. Search is one of my favorite things. It's a way for you to kind of search for similar schools and look at indicators across all those similar schools. And we'll take a look at that in a minute as well. And then download data. Download data, again, is a good way to get data printed out to a PDF or download it to your computer and manipulate it on your own in Excel or yourself. So that's a quick overview of iExplore. What I want to do now, I'll pause for a minute just to see if there's any questions, but then I'm also going to go over to the presentation.
It does not look like there's additional questions.
Great. So, as I mentioned, these slides too will walk you through some of what we looked at. So go through here and you can take a look at some of the things in more detail because I went through it even a little bit faster. But the next section I wanted to do is actually, this is two purposes of this. One is to give you some thoughts about how you might look at this data and how you might use it, whether you're a parent or a teacher or a principal, et cetera. And then also want to give you some thoughts about if you wanted to show other teachers in your schools this information and let them play around. Here are some activities, I call them activities, little scenarios that you might want to consider, and let people go in and try to do it. And so I actually put in here, although whether you should look in iReport or iExplore, you could, if you're sharing this with some people in your school, you could actually take that off and let them think through, okay, am I going to go to iExplore for this? Or am I going to go to iReport for this, depending on the question. But I'm going to actually take these scenarios and we're going to walk through these and look at what the data, look at how you'd find these answers. So in the first question I'm posing to myself, is that you're interested in how students on an IEP performed in your district on the math assessment. And how did this compare to the state? And so to do that, because we're talking about how students did in my school, I'm going to go to iReport. Because we're talking about achievement data, in particular math, we're going to go to achievement. And so I'd go into iReport, I go to achievement, we'll just choose Kennett Middle School since I'm already here. And we're talking about math. So this was the math achievement. And if you remember before, if you wanted to find out a breakout within math achievement based on demographics, you click on that arrow. And here you can see right away that for students with disabilities, 10% of the students were proficient on the math assessment within the school. And I think the question said, how did that compare to the state? And so again, that information is actually not on this page. Where we have it in context, it's in context, it shows you how the state did, but that's not broken down by subgroup. That's just for the entire school. So if you wanted to see how students on IEP did in the state, that's when you'd have to go to the bottom here, click on the state report, and it's going to open up a new tab, go to the achievement tab. Once it's opened it up, click on the same math flyout, and here we can see across the state, 13% of students with disabilities were proficient in math. So you can hear the state, it was 13. If we look at our school, I think we said it was, I'm sorry, wrong one. It was 10%, I think we said. So that's how you'd go about answering the question, how did students with disabilities do in my school versus the state? This probably also is a point that makes me think about the fact that I should describe the fact that when I say our students, one thing that's a little confusing I know many of you folks who are teaching in schools or working in schools and you're thinking about these percentages, They may vary a little bit from what you see somewhere else. So as an example, for those of you who use the Cambium system, and you look at percent proficient, that's the system that's used to administer the SAS assessment, NHSAS assessment. You may see that, instead of 43% of your students are proficient, you're seeing in that system it's 46% or it's 39%. In part, that's typically because you've got to think about what students we're including when we say 43% of students are proficient in this school. In our system here that we're sharing with you, we are very specific about making sure we're only including students who are enrolled in that school for at least 90 or in the district for at least 90% of the year. So it might be that you've got a student who came into your school in January from another state. They wouldn't be included in this count because we don't want to kind of consider you. We don't want to consider the outcome of that student for this school because they really weren't enrolled in that school throughout the entire year. So there are many reasons like that. That's kind of the primary reason that you might not see that student. You might see a little bit difference between the percentages you're seeing here versus the percentages you might see in some other system. Okay, let me go back here to the next question. So next question, I want to know if the average class size in our school is above or below the state average. So again, I could do this in iReport the same way I just did, but for class size, I'm going to show you this way in iExplore. So I'll go to iExplore. We are going to go to the Explore category because we just want to explore one indicator, class size. We had already done it, I guess. So here you go. Here are the schools within the state. I can actually, this is how the schools are doing, as I mentioned earlier, class size versus proficiency. I can actually specify my school. So maybe it's Portsmouth Middle School we're looking at. Huh? I'm surprised it didn't jump to it. So I'll scroll down and find it. Oh, I was limiting to Lakes region. That's why I'm not seeing it. So I've got to apply all. So now I've got to look at the entire state. Now I probably can just type in Portsmouth. Yeah, so now I can type Portsmouth Middle School. And now we can see Portsmouth Middle School should be highlighted here, but it's not for some reason. So this is, my example was not a good example, but you can typically type in the name and you'll see where they live on the graph to the right. And again, I'm sorry, I started to say, I don't think I showed this, but I thought the state of New Hampshire should be here. Let me see actually if I can do that here. No. Okay. I probably walked myself down the wrong path for this. So I guess the other way I could have done this is gone to iReport and looked at the state report versus the local school. But this would be a way that you could compare your school to another school. Sorry. Let me pass that by and go to the next one, which is our middle school switched math programs a few years ago. And I wanted to see the math performance over the past 3 years. So again, you want to look at your school, you want to look at math performance, you want to look longitudinally. So that's iReport because it's your school. I'm actually on the right page right here. You're looking at math performance and we can only see 2 years of math performance. Math is the blue, I think. Because there was no COVID the year before, so we're only seeing 2 years, but this is where you can see the math performance over years. I should mention, as I mentioned earlier, I can actually choose the different years. So if I go down back to 2019, for example, you'll see that information for 2019, 2018, and 2017. So here you can see how, so maybe this is a program that you put in place back in 2017. And so if this was your math program, you might not be too excited about what happened because the performance went down. But that would be a way that you would look at how your performance did over time. Okay, let me go to the last couple of items here. This is one of my favorites. So here you're a school, you've been struggling with your performance on the state assessment. Maybe you're a school board member, maybe you're a principal, and you want to look for other similar districts or schools around the state and talk to them. What are they doing? Ones that seem to be doing better in performance than you're doing in your school. Maybe it's on math, maybe it's on all the state assessment. But you only want to look at similar schools. You don't want to look at, schools that might only have 15 kids. You want to look at schools, if you're a school that has 300 and 400 kids, a school of that magnitude. Maybe you're a district that has a large percentage of students who are on free and reduced lunch. So maybe you only want to look at schools that have a similar percentage of students. So to look at that, again, we're looking at lots of schools across the state. So I'm going to go to iExplore. The search feature lets you kind of search for similar schools or search for similarities across indicators. So in this case, I'm going to choose percent proficient. So we're going to do percent of students who are proficient, we'll say, in math. I'm just going to choose math. And this right away shows you all of schools in the state. And actually, this would have been a better way, as I was thinking about my other question before. I think it was the cost per pupil. This right away shows you the state versus your schools, your other schools. But let's do it here. We're talking about looking for similar schools and how that did well in proficiency. So right away we see, here's some schools that did great on proficiency, but maybe they have very low percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. So I'm going to choose economically disadvantaged. And we can see, in fact, that many of these schools that are doing really well here have very low economically disadvantaged numbers. Let me also say that we want to look at the enrollment of students. I'm going to click total enrollment. Again, this shows you the size of the number of students in the school. And there's not another indicator, but maybe I want to choose educator experience, so classes taught by experienced educators. So now what I can do is I can limit any of these indicators. So the first one is going to show me all the results for proficiency in math, but I can limit the next indicators. So here, if I go into this field instead of 10, I can say, I think we said we only want schools that have at least 40% of their students who are economically disadvantaged. So now that's all we're seeing. It's limited this list to just those students. But you'll see a lot of those schools with high proficient or higher proficiency, but high level of students who are on free reduced lunch are also very small. And I apologize, I'm not sure why that keeps on popping up. So maybe we all, like we said before, we only want to look at schools that have at least 300 students. So again, I could type 300. I could also just move that little barrier. And now we're seeing what schools in the state seem to do better, so the higher percent achievement, but also had a high percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged and high percentage and populations above 300. In fact, we can also happen to see what their classes of experienced educator, percentage classes taught by experienced educators, but we're not going to limit that. And so here we can see, for example, Berlin Elementary School is one that has, higher than the state average in terms of percent proficient, but they also have high level of students economically disadvantaged and high population of students. So that might be a school that I might want to reach out to and get an idea of, are there certain things that they're doing? Milford, Lakewood School might be another one. So great tool, the search tool, to look for schools throughout the state that might have some similarities to you, but then you can drill down and ask them about certain indicators. Okay. We are running out of time, so I'm going to skip this last one, but my principal wants to know if schools who have more experienced educators spend more dollars per student. You would go to iExplore because you're looking at two indicators. You would go to the compare indicator, the discover tab. You would choose those two indicators. I can't resist, I'll just do it real quick. So more experienced educators and dollars per student. So the first indicator is educators. So we want experienced educators. So classes taught by experienced educators. The second indicator we were talking about was cost for schools. So that's a finance thing. So average cost per pupil, I think that's what it was. So now I select those two. We don't have finance data yet for 2022, so I have to go back to a prior year. But here now we can see how is the classes taught by experienced educators compared on the y-axis, x-axis compared to cost per pupil. And so here you can see the correlation factor is 0.23, which is low. So this is saying there is not a relationship between cost per pupil and experienced educators, at least in this data that we're looking at. And you can see there's schools that have, high classes taught by experienced educators and low cost, and the same thing, high and high cost. So there's not really a correlation. Okay, I apologize. I hope you all can stay on for just a couple more minutes and we'll finish up. But hopefully that gives you kind of an overview of iReport and iExplore. Hopefully it gives you enough that you feel comfortable now playing around with it. I've got a slide here with some things to remember, so I'll let you read through these on your own, but things like, look for the question mark to get more information about that page. Realize things like COVID means we didn't collect that data that year. and pay attention to the Pearson R value if you're looking for correlations. So read through these in case you want to think about things as you're looking at the different pages. Last component in the last minute we've got here. There is, as I mentioned earlier, stuff coming in the next few months. So coming in March, two big things. One is we will have finance and graduation data. So that data will be in iReport and iExplore for 2022. So look for that soon. The other thing, which is even more exciting, at least from my perspective, is a new dashboard. I should also real quickly give credit to Dina Raybuck. Dina is one of the developers at the Department of Ed. She's been there for quite some time. She is a wonderful asset to the department because she's got amazing technology experience and she really understands education data and the education world. And she's been kind of the mastermind behind iReport and iExplore. She has been also the mastermind behind this iAchieve, or whatever it's going to be called. We're calling it now iAchieve. But it's going to be another dashboard similar to those two that lets you dive into achievement data. And so it lets you look at things, for example, it's going to break down, and these are some example screenshots. How did my ELA do by grade over time? And so you can look for trends here. And you can look, for example, let me see if I see anything that I can quickly point out. I see that my third grade in 2018, only 52% of my students were proficient. In 2019, the fourth grade was 49%. And in 2021, the fifth grade was 32%. So most of these are probably similar students. And we're seeing that they are declining in proficiency. That may not have happened, this year it didn't happen. These went up. So this might be something that this trend, 52 to 49 to 32, might be something that would raise concern, and it might be something that you'd want to talk more about as a team within your school. So it's going to be a really cool feature. Another feature you're going to see here is achievement level movement. So you're going to be able to see, of all my kids who are level 2, how many of those kids were level 1 the year before, how many of those kids were level 2 the year before. So you can kind of get an idea of whether kids are moving up, moving down, or kind of where they're going from one year to the next. There'll be some other nice data movement data kind of information through the iAchieve dashboard. We get a lot of information about participation, who's participating, who's not, that type of thing as well. So that's coming soon. Look out for it, and we will definitely be doing some more trainings on that, as well as other trainings on iReport and iPlatform as well. So with that, I'm going to just mention again, there's Dina's email, my email, accountability. Kier Young has mentioned accountability email several times. Please, those emails will get to the right person. So feel free to send anything to accountability@doe.nh.gov. Please reach out to me. You got my cell phone there. You're welcome to call it. We are here to help. There's a place where you can put in help desk tickets, and that goes to a help desk. If you've got a screenshot, something's not working, or you've got a question about some data, feel free to send a question to the help desk as well. So with
Mike?
that,
one quick thing. So Dan, a couple of people have asked about accessing the slides as well as on our team in terms of how to share. So can you speak to that?
Sure. So I think
you put a link in the chat.
Yep.
I think to the slides. Is that correct?
I did, but if you came on late, you might not have seen it. So let me just copy
Mike, I've actually been sharing the link to folks who specifically asked for it in the chat. So
great. Oh, because I didn't share it to everybody. I shared it to just the panelists. That was my mistake.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it.
You want to go ahead and just do that real quick?
I did. And I totally apologize because I wanted you all to have it anytime, but that way you had to focus on me and you weren't looking on your own. So that's a good thing.
Okay.
And before we wrap up, I also did want to just remind everybody that our email has been sent out to all superintendents and as well as via the newsletter, accountability newsletter, that by February 3rd, there is a requirement for all districts to upload a link to their district and school report cards on their district website. So this is an ESSA requirement for all districts. ESSA specifically states that districts are required to provide the state report card, in this case, iReport link on their website. So if you haven't already done so, please do that by February 3rd.
Thank you, Kieran. Kieran asked me to say that and I forgot. I'm so sorry. I added to the slide, but I'm glad you said it. Thank you. You asked me before the presentation. I forgot. So that link, by the way, to the slideshow should bring you to this folder, and there's a certificate in the folder. For those of you who need professional development hours and want that, you can print out the certificate, and then the presentation is here in this folder. If you can't get to it for any reason, let us know. The other thing I should point out is that, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you go to iPlatform NH and you go to this training resources, this recording will be posted here. We also can post the presentation here. We should probably do that. So we'll do that as well, just so you've got the presentation here too. What else? Anything else, Karen, Kieran, Kristen?
Not that I can think of.
Well, thank you all very much. I apologize for going over a few minutes. Hopefully this kind of got you understanding the tool. Please reach out with questions or any data concerns you have, and please share this with others. Take that presentation, use the notes, and use it to hopefully share this with your colleagues and friends as well.
I'm so glad. It was great, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.